Okay, so I'm going to give an update on biological control of emerald ash borer. I'm going to begin by saying this is none of my own work. This is Krista Rao's project in collaboration with Dean Jones, who is her technician. Krista wasn't available to give this talk today. So, hey, we have success. All right. Thank you, Kat Hodgins. And this work could not be possible without the collaboration of a whole great long list of public and private landowners in Southern Ontario and Quebec that have graciously donated or allowed the use of their land for the Biological Control Release Program. So just start by thanking all those folks. So I'll give the summary at the beginning in case we get cut off. So we had new detections of emerald ash borer in the Maritimes in 2018. We released 3 species of biological control agents that have now been released in Canada, and establishment impact surveys for these parasitoids are ongoing. And I'll cover that in the talk today. So just talk a little bit about the present range of emerald ash borer in Canada. So you've seen this map a couple times. The yellow areas show the regulated areas in Canada, so this is the region that CFI says you can freely move ash wood, and it roughly corresponds to the infested area. And we saw Mike's talk earlier showing the range in Ontario. The exception is a little bit in Northern Ontario, where the regulated area is a little bit bigger than what we know the range, what we think the range to be. What you see on there is we have sort of the pocket infestation in Thunder Bay. We have the find from Winnipeg earlier, late last year, this year, and then what's been notable this year is the 2 infestations, one in sort of northwestern New Brunswick in the town of Edmundston, and then just this past month in Bedford, Nova Scotia. So I actually had to extend the map. My map is newer than CFIA's own map. So, the interesting thing about that one in New Brunswick is it led to the first detection in Maine, because the population found in New Brunswick was literally across the river from northern Maine. So they found their population in New Brunswick, population in Maine, and I think that's probably the first time that emerald ash borer has actually crossed backwards from Canada into the U.S. All of our other infestations have probably been U.S. into Canada. So, yeah, totally. We'll leave political comments. I was at a meeting recently in Europe with Americans and Europeans, and we had two topics that were not available for discussion, and that was the president to the south of us and Brexit. So this room probably doesn't need to know this, but the movement of emerald ash borer is associated with probably by firewood, and that's the most common vector. So this well-used cartoon, don't move firewood. Let's talk a little about life cycle and hosts, and again, most folks probably know this, but it's relevant to understand the biological control program and how it works and where it's working. So EAB emerges as an adult in the spring, goes through a period of what's called maturation feeding, where the adults need to feed on leaves before it's ready to mate and start to lay eggs. When it is ready to mate and lay eggs, it lays those eggs underneath the bark and bark crevices on the bole and on the branches. These eggs mature, and the eggs hatch and the neonates chew their way into the tree, and they start to feed on the phloem layer, and they feed through the summer into the fall, depending on what time of year it is. And if they make it far enough during the feeding season, they will pupate in pupal chambers in the wood, and then pupate in the spring, emerging as adults the next summer. In parts of Canada and parts of Southern Ontario, and in some populations, that whole life cycle takes 1 year to complete. So that's most of the range, certainly most of the range in the U.S., well-established populations where we have large populations and where we have poorly defended trees, so trees that aren't able to resist emerald ash borer. We have, in parts of Canada and what we're finding in parts of the northern part of emerald ash borer's range, we have a 2-year life cycle. So EAB doesn't complete its complete larval feeding cycle within that first year, so it spends the winter as an intermediate larval stage and completes feeding the next summer, and then overwinters again as a pre-pupa, and then pupates and emerges as an adult after 2 years. That's more common in the north, we think. It's more common in new populations, it's common in smaller populations, and it's probably common in well-defended trees. And so integrating these life cycles with our management tactics is important, so we make sure we're targeting biological control agents at the right time and at the right stage. So the hosts of, in Canada, we have green ash, white ash, and becoming more important, black ash, certainly as we move north in northern Canada. So I'll talk a bit about biological control in general. So just a little bit of biology. We're dealing with parasitoids. So everybody's seen the movie Aliens, or at least depends how old you are. When I give this talk to younger people, they're like, I don't know what movie you're talking about. But this is the movie with Ripley and Sigourney Weaver. If you remember, the guy gets attacked by the alien. Alien goes inside him and then bursts out of his chest, right? Okay, so that's a parasitoid. Parasitoid kills the host. Parasite is like a nematode. Parasite or a tapeworm, reduces the vitality of the host but doesn't necessarily kill it. So we're dealing with parasitoids, things that kill the thing they're living inside and eating. So in North America, we are dealing with both native parasitoids and introduced parasitoids. So all of these attack emerald ash borer, either larvae or eggs when they're feeding in the tree, and they, like I said, they kill by feeding on the developing host. And the most important part is they don't sting or bite people. So these are little wee tiny bugs. They don't actually attack anything. And so we have the two insects on top. Those are our native parasitoids that have adopted EAB. Sometime since it was introduced into North America. So those are Antenicolus capretti and Phasgonophorus sulcata, Antenicolus and Phas. Like I said, they're native to North America. They adopted EAB as a host. So emerald ash borer was probably introduced into Michigan sometime in the early to mid-1990s. Sometime between then and the time it was discovered, these two species adopted EAB as a host. They took advantage of that resource. They tend to be associated with declining populations of EAB. We don't find them in new populations. We tend to find them in one that's gone over the peak and is starting to decline. There's been some work ongoing at the University of Toronto. There's a PhD student there who just recently defended his thesis looking at integrating these parasitoids into other control programs, using them as a way to reduce the viability of populations by sort of moving them around in the landscape from later stage infestations to newer stage infestations. And I think his name's Justin Godden, and I think he should be, the results of his research should be coming out soon. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is the classical biological control program using introduced parasitoids from China to control emerald ash borer. And Jeff suggested that I should give a primer on classical biological control. So if you know what classical biological control is, this is going to be boring. So like, check your Twitter feed or something. So but just sort of talk about what classical biological control is, we're going to use a bit of an example, and I just randomly picked two places on Earth that were far apart so that I could draw a picture. So in normally functioning ecosystem, you have insects and you have biological controls, natural enemies, things that eat them, right? Eat them normally in the place where they belong. Sometimes what happens is insects get moved from one place to another. So in our hypothetical example, it's something moving from North America to Australia, which biogeographically is highly unlikely, but it makes for nice pictures. So if something happens, that insect gets introduced into a new place. So then what happens is researchers from the place that the insect has been introduced go to where they eventually figure out that the insect came from, and they look for biological controls. And when they find them, they return to where they came from with those biological controls, and then a whole bunch of research happens to make sure that it's safe to release these agents into the new environment, and then hopefully that's what happens. So what you hopefully wind up with is this situation where you have the insect and its biological controls in its original native range with a functioning interaction. And then you also replicate that interaction in the new environment with the new biological controls, and so you establish that dynamic in the new range, and hopefully you get some kind of control of the insect. That's essentially what's been attempted, or what's being attempted now with emerald ash borer. So emerald ash borer's native range is China. When it was first found in 2002, one of the first things the U.S. Forest Service did was go to China looking for natural enemies of emerald ash borer, and began the process to bring these over, figure out how to rear them in colony, do the efficacy testing, do the safety testing to make sure it works, and then release those out into, and then go through the process of figuring out how to release those into the environment. So these are a number of species were tried. These are the three larval parasitoids that have shown the most promise. We have, from left to right, we have Spacius agrilli, Spacius gallinae, and then Tetrasticus planipinisi. These are all from China, so these are not native to North America. Spacius agrilli was approved for release in Canada, but what's been since found, since it was discovered, and now, is that populations don't do well when it's introduced above 40 degrees north latitude. It has to do with the emerald ash borer cycle and the cycle of Spacius agrilli. They don't link up well north of 40 degrees north. The next one, Spacius gallinae, is from the Russian Far East, with a climate much more similar to certainly us and parts of North America north of 40 degrees, and certainly and what the evidence is showing is it matches our climate better. It also matches well with those populations that are in a 2-year life cycle. So this was approved for release in Canada in spring of 2017, and that's when the first releases were done. And then the one on the right is Tetrasticus planipinisi. Released since 2009 in the U.S., since 2013 in Canada, and that was work began by Dr. Barry Lyons, and then passed on to Krista when Barry retired. And Tetrasticus is by far the most commonly released agent in North America. It's been released in hundreds, if not thousands, of locations in the U.S. and then also in Canada. So there are also 2 egg parasitoids. So just to give you a sense of scale, in that picture on the left, that's the parasitoid wasp. The large white thing to the right of the parasitoid wasp is an emerald ash borer egg. So these are very, very tiny parasitoids, and they target the egg. So they control the insect before it even starts to feed on the tree. Those larval parasitoids attack the larva as it's feeding in the tree, so there is a little bit of damage that occurs because of the larva, but then the parasitoid kills it and reproduces inside that. So these two egg parasitoids, Ubius agrilli was first released in 2009 in the U.S. and in 2015 in Canada. And then this other one, Ubius primor scansus, is undergoing testing in the U.S. It's not been approved for release in either country. And I think it's one that it's supposed to be a little more cold tolerant, so like Spacius gallinae. So I apologize for this thing that's popped over the screen. I don't know what it is, but I don't want to touch it in case I break something. So talk a little about how do we get these parasitoids. The majority of the parasitoids for the Canadian program come from the USDA Biological Control Rearing Facility in Brighton, Michigan. So this is a purpose-built, dedicated facility that produces EAB, has those emerald ash borer attack little mini bolts, which is what you see there on the left, and then those mini bolts are exposed to colony populations of one of the parasitoids, and then from that, those mini bolts are given out for release. So that's how you produce the larval parasitoids. The egg parasitoids are done in a very similar manner. You have emerald ash borer lay eggs on coffee filters, and then you expose those coffee filters with the eggs to populations of the egg parasitoid, and then take those to the field. We have a similar rearing facility for 2 of the parasitoids here in Sault Ste. Marie in the insect production facility, with the first releases made of Canadian-grown parasitoids happening last year. So we rear Tetrasticus and Ubius. So the releases. Oh no! I have another picture. Okay, so there are 2 pictures here. The one on the left shows Gene Jones, and the thing to the left of Gene's left is a mini bolt hanging from a tree. So these mini bolts contain parasitized emerald ash borer larvae with Tetrasticus or Spacius pupa inside them. These are taken to the forest, hung in a tree, and then the parasitoids emerge from these and attack emerald ash borer that are resident in the trees in that surrounding forest. On the right, if you could see it, is what's called an ubinator, which is basically a pill bottle-sized roll of plastic with those coffee filters containing the EAB eggs rolled up inside. So you take that, you staple that to the tree, and then the little egg parasitoids come out of that and disperse into the forest and attack the emerald ash borer eggs. And you put these out at different times of the year, depending on which stage of the insect that you're trying to target. So that's how the releases are done. And this has been, this has sort of been the bulk of the work for the program, and this is where the partners with the private public landowners that have donated and allowed their property to be used by the Forest Service for this research program to do the releases on their property. Because most of this work is being done in Southern Ontario, where the majority of the landowners are not. It's not Crown land. Oh, no. Oh, no. Okay, that was just a picture. Oh, no. You're kidding me. Okay, well, that's the scariest thing. Oh, okay. Okay, that's the scariest thing that can ever happen to anybody during a presentation. Okay, so there are three things in this slide. You can only see two of them. So the first one is the picture of Tetrasticus. Below Tetrasticus are the release numbers for 2013 to 2018. As you can see, so the numbers are increasing every year. What you can't see on the right is a map of the release sites. So I'm going to go to the next one. This is a map for Ubius. The map for Tetrasticus is very similar. So what you're seeing are colored dots that show where the releases have been made for the different parasitoids. So the release sites for Tetrasticus start in the first year releases, which was 2013, and have generally moved from southwestern Ontario up through the eastern Ontario and as far as past Montreal. We've also done releases on St. Joseph Island and Sault Ste. Marie. So if you can sort of imagine a band progressing through time from southwestern Ontario up through Montreal and north of Montreal, that's sort of been the progression of releases. What's done with these parasitoids is, at a given site, parasitoid releases are done for 2 or 3 years, right? So they're used as a release site for 2 or 3 years, and then the program moves to a new site. So if you can see the bottom there, it says just when the year of the first releases was done. So a site that has first release in 2013 had parasitoids released in 2013, 2014, 2015, and then what happened next was those sites were assessed to see if the parasitoids established, and then they were left alone for a while. And then the next phase is seeing if the parasitoids are having an effect, and that's part of the program that started right now. So first, Tetrasticus has been released the longest in Canada. This is Ubius. Releases of Ubius started in 2015, have gone on through this year. And again, similar pattern to Tetrasticus. They started in the southwest and have moved up towards eastern Ontario around Ottawa. And the releases around Ottawa are done in collaboration with the National Capital Commission, so on some NCC lands, and then in around Montreal and Quebec. And then there's one site in around Barrie where Chris has been doing a research program with Ubius looking at releases in urban sites. So that's some work she's been doing. And then the last one is Spathius galanae, which is our new release, and it's only been done in the last 2 years, mostly in eastern Ontario, with one site down near Oshawa. So this is small numbers of releases. This is the first couple years of the program, so this is just ongoing now. So I talked a little bit about the impact. So talking about just the 3 that have been released, so Tetrasticus, Ubius, and Spathius galanae. Tetrasticus is established at all of the sites that releases were done between 2013 and 2016. The impact establishments at those 2013 release sites began this year. So the crews went into those sites in the spring. We're cutting some of the smaller trees, peeling them to look for evidence of parasitism, and that's work that's data that's still being processed. The Ubius, the establishment and the impact surveys are planned. As you might imagine, Ubius is a great deal harder to survey for. So what you need to do is find emerald ash borer eggs. And the technique that's been developed in the U.S. is you go to a stand where you've released Ubius, you take a bucket and a draw knife, and you peel the bark into the bucket. And then you take the bucket back to the lab and you sift that peeled bark looking for emerald ash borer eggs. So these are like very tiny. It's like looking sort of for pepper in a haystack. So it's very tedious work. It's been done. They started to do this in the U.S. We haven't started to do it in Canada. There's some work maybe looking at genetic techniques for detecting these parasitoids. And then galanae, since it's only in the second year releases, it's way too early to begin to look at. Is it established or is it having an effect? So just return to the summary slide. There's been these significant detections in the Maritimes in 2018. We've had these 3 species of agents that have now been released, and then we've had the establishment and the impact surveys are ongoing. So that's the end of the talk.